So this is part B of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel being broadcast only on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, but only on the internet, online. So this is KhoodeelaarTV television channel part B on Monday the 19th of July 2021, which coincides with the beginning of the week marking the Eid al-Adha, the Eid to commemorate the sacrifice made by Prophet Abraham or Ibrahim, peace be on him, on a command from God, challenging the Prophet to prove his loyalty to the Almighty. And this is the issue that we touched on at the beginning, part A, and promised to look in more detail, look at it in more detail in later parts. And this is part B. And what I wrote decades ago as the greed of Eid, I called it. The greed of Eid, I called it, based entirely on the evidence of the families, individuals' behavior during mainly the Eid al-Fitr, the one about giving to people who have less. But I think that the same applies to the Eid al-Adha and the behavior of Muslims during the Eid of sacrifice. And given the understanding of the world and the history of the world and the history of the people that call themselves the community, the Ummah, and my association is more with the sect called the Sunnis, but general, vague, and very similar kind of evidence gathered from the part called the Shia. And my belief is based entirely on the evidence that, contrary to the guidance, the speeches, and the various advocacy enjoining on the Muslims to behave selflessly, without greed, Muslims on the whole behave selfishly and with greed. Now, how is that possible? Because the evidence, the continuing evidence of the continuing behavior of the Muslims shows that the Muslims throughout the whole year outside of the periods covered by the month of Ramadan preceding the Eid al-Fitr, or the 2.5 months since the Eid al-Fitr and before the Eid al-Adha, the Eid of sacrifice. Muslims predominantly, overwhelmingly, Muslims don't behave in accordance with the guidance. And they behave selfishly and carelessly, uncaringly, when it comes to looking at the needs of the neighbors and the states of the neighbors. So this raises the question about the Muslim Ummah and its real moral position and the sources of the morality of the Muslim faith or Islamic faith. And I include the behavior. I include in the description of the behavior of everyone, including the behavior of those who are in positions as imams leading the prayers and leading the actual speech making, advocacy and explaining, both in the Sunni and in the Shia. That is the main two groups of the Islamic faith. And there is nothing in between those two periods, and also in the rest of the period, whatever the calendar. That is to say, whether the calendar is kind of treated as being from the Islamic calendar counting, or from the calendar that is used mainly in the West. For example, the calendar that says today is the 19th of July 2021. Now the Muslims actually addressing the state of the advocacy that the Muslims have established over the decades of my empirical knowledge, observation and experience, and also my studies dating back to pre-Islamic periods and since the beginning of the pre-Islamic, immediate pre-Islamic period, and also the beginning of the Islamic calendar. And I include all the main rituals in the Islamic faith. And I find no evidence that the Muslims overwhelmingly are observing the tenets of less greed and more care and compassion. That not only covers the lives and the kind of remits of the various societies across the globe. Societies meaning Muslim majority places, Muslim majority communities, as well as places where Muslims are not in the majority, but are recognized as based on the faith. There is no institution that I know of or I can access. There is no institution anywhere on the planet that I can access, or I can describe, or I can check, or I can interrogate. Interrogate meaning the whole paraphernalia, the entirety of the concept of interrogation. Basic interrogation, extensive interrogation, theological, sociological, and ethical and moral, as well as, of course, theological. There is no institution or agency that I can interrogate that actually provides the answers or enables the questioning of the entirety of the Islamic faith, including all the sects and beyond, because there are others who claim to be Muslim as well. They are not part of the Sunni or the Shia sects. For instance, we discussed the Aga Khanis, the Ismailis, and I refer to Yasmin Ali Baisi as a Ismaili and others, and I'm not going to list all of them. The paper I'm holding is, of course, the Sunday Times of yesterday, Sunday the 18th of July 2021. And the reason I'm doing that is, one, to do with the pedophile who took his ex-partner to court, family court, 27 times. And that is something that refers to the complete fragmentation, absence of the idea of justice through the judiciary in England. And we shall talk about that later, but just to take a look at the actual detailed exhibition of the piece by Hrs Tickle. This is in the news review of the Sunday Times. That's the one, Hrs Tickle's piece, which says that a pedophile has forced me to court 37 times to get my kids. And this is the piece based on the mother of the children, Julia. She's being named Julia. Now, the reason I'm referring to that one is to do with the number of times that the proven pedophile was allowed by the family court to take the mother of the children 37 times in a brazen bid to get the kids. Now, somebody who has been a proven, convicted pedophile should not have been allowed even one time, but he has been given 27 times. Now, that shows the complete collapse of the so-called judiciary. It's like the complete collapse of the policing, the complete collapse of the kind of idea of substance or substantive morality and ethics in the behavior in the decision-making powers abused by those in positions of power, like, for example, as embodied, that is, not like meaning like approve of, but as embodied in, exemplified, personified in Boris Johnson. And what is happening in the judicial morass? The judicial morass that dominates Little England and dominates the main kind of overwhelming number of cases of the organization or the framework or the place called the United Kingdom. What is happening with the so-called freedom today that Johnson has actually announced is typical of what is happening in every part of the United Kingdom, so-called, and every part of the decision-making executive in every agency, including the complementary agencies that are de facto parts of the state. For example, a number of registered charities, voluntary organizations that are de facto treated as extensions of the UK executive. Because those charities perform the function of stooges, colluders to the state, contrary to the published aims and objects. And the fact that the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, carried out a fascistic raid on a suspected source whistleblower who actually blew the whistle on Matt Haque and his adulterous partner, shows that the regime at the Information Commissioner's Office is not only upholding the right to freedom of individuals to protect the data, but that it is a fascistic extension of the fascistic agenda operated by the corrupt, unjust, racist system. And there is no redress through the court system, which is itself corrupt, racist, unaccountable, inaccessible, and completely dysfunctional. So we shall be continuing on all of these in the next parts